Good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel James, the Manager of Community at vCIO Toolbox, and we're here for our Thursday morning MSP Acceleration Conversations. I'm joined every week here by Brian Doyle, and we talk about strategies and topics that help your MSP up-level your client relationships. We've been doing a series on the Office of the vCIO, and we're going to continue that this week by talking about the role of the vCISO or Virtual Chief Security Officer. So, Brian, take it away. What is the need for this Virtual Chief Security Officer?
Well, Rachel, first, thank you for kicking this off. And, the reality is we want to continue our discussion today on the whole Office of vCIO by going into what the vCISO role is. For those that haven't attended, you can go back on YouTube and take a look as we talk about what the Office of the vCIO really is, a larger scale concept of not trying to find the unicorn, that one guy that can wear all hats, but how to leverage your whole team to basically help support whoever the individual is acting in the vCIO role by giving them the tools they need and the support they need to hit the market. We've talked about the role of the vCIO, the role of the engineer, and today, obviously, we're heading into the role of the vCISO. So what is driving that need, right? Well, as everybody knows, the industry is starting to shift to a security-based focus. If you've attended any of the industry events of late, and certainly as you're building your own security stacks, you're seeing that the conversation is starting to be more security first, operational support second. So, the shifting need for security first really means we have to have individuals or a plan to help educate our customers to what they're going to require. MSPs by nature look at things very operationally and service delivery focused, right? And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's how we all made our money for a number of years. But there's a huge opportunity to bring back the consulting, which is really what we did back in the 90s and early 2000s before the MSP craze. Back early, which is really bringing back the advisory services. So the customer needs our support. One, they're not in tune with the emerging threats that occur every single day, right? They're not keeping up on that news. They're not abreast of it. Most of them don't even care. They're assuming that we're on top of it. So we want to make sure that we're putting the resources together that we require in order to stay on top of that. The second thing is that more and more, as these threats emerge, MSPs are starting to strengthen their stacks. But the customer needs to be educated to why they need these tools, which could potentially double in cost what their MSP contracts look like. And we're seeing a trend where more of the pure play MSSPs, those that went to market first as pure play security advisors and security solutions providers, are now just adding MSP to their service portfolio as a value added ride along for those customers that they're already servicing on the security side. So some of you maybe have even experienced losing good customers to MSSPs, but we're definitely seeing this. And, while these things have probably pros and cons on all sides, it's really becoming an emerging area of opportunity for the MSP as they really can move into the next generation of services and really up-level themselves from just being that operational partner that unfortunately sometimes they get pigeonholed into, which also means they're only getting access as far as the point of contact and they're not part of the executive level. And this is going to allow them to elevate their perception yet a step further in there and really be the leader that the customer needs.
Yeah, it sounds like it's really a chance for them to be a source of information for their clients. And maybe we can go a little bit more into that.
Yeah, no doubt. When we talk a little bit about, being a little bit more informational for our clients, I'm sure everybody at this point has heard of ISOs, the information sharing and analysis organizations that are available to us. CompTIA has a great one that's relatively inexpensive. When you think about it on an annual subscription for all MSPs, I think it's around $1,500 a year. And really what this means is you're getting a team of professionals that are seeing these threats in real time, that are communicating across the globe to get this information, but also synthesizing this information. And this is a critical step. It's kind of like drinking from the fire hose. think about even when you go in and look at your firewall syslogs, right? There's tons of information, but what are the things that we really care about? And these information sharing organizations can help you synthesize it, and then in turn, you can go to your customer partners and advise them when there's something critical that can really impact them. Or look at those advisories and determine which set of customers might be impacted by that. And imagine the power you've got if you can communicate in relatively real time to pockets of people when there's something that pertains directly to them. Talk about sticky. It really is going to help you solidify the relationship a bit. Another thing that really calls for there to be kind of a security leader in tandem with the vCIO, and again, this can be the same resource depending on who holds that skill set.
Sure.
But the reason they need it is they need education too. The customer still does not understand the threats that are out there, but more importantly, doesn't understand how to avoid them. Security awareness training is absolutely something that I hear every MSP talking about, and they're going to the players and getting this training in place. But do you have somebody looking at this to see how people are actually adhering to it? You can send all the training out in the world, but if people don't open up that email or go into that portal, they're still not getting educated. All you've done is provide the resource. Sure. So, your vCISO would be the person that's kind of looking over that and providing some governance over those processes and making sure these people get educated. Because if you think that these things can't still happen, look, one of my clients, unfortunately, one of their customers just this week got a email from a company that they do business with, but the email had an extra S added to the email address. They didn't even pay attention to it. And $15,000 has gone from their business account today because they paid it off as an invoice. And that's the problem, because if these invoices look like what they are, they're going to get passed off. So we really need to get those users to at least go, wait, I don't think we were expecting this before I go wire the money, right? Those kind of things. And the real reason you need to have a vCISO is your customers expect it from you already. The reality is they think you are the security guy, even if it's not part of your service today. The assumption, and we've all been there, is when they hire you, no matter what your contract says, they think you're going to do it all for them. So you need to protect your liability from the gaps. Yes, structure your contracts to solve there, but then make sure you're having that conversation so the customer can't say, but why didn't you tell me? I would have done more, right? So we want to make sure that we've got somebody that's really looking not just at the day-to-day gaps and are we being contract compliant, but where are the gaps in the customer's environment or the customer's policies that we can jump into? So there's a lot of reasons why this vCISO role, again, whether it is the vCIO holding that role and being trained up, whether it's somebody specific in your organization, is becoming more and more critical as liability not only trickles down deeper to the clients, but deeper to the MSPs themselves.
Yeah, well, let's go deeper into liability there, because that's a conversation I know has been really developing over the past few years in this industry. I feel like there are issues that customers are facing in the subject of liability that can help them really benefit from having a vCISO.
Yeah, I mean, we know there's all kinds of different things that are hitting us today, right? One of the biggest ones on everybody's mind is obtaining cyber insurance. It's getting harder. And look, I'm never here to defend an insurance company. I will say that out loud. But you do got to understand the plight that's being faced. When you underwrite a policy, you're underwriting it with exposure limits, right? And you're really looking at what the exposure can be and saying this is what the premium should be. But if you look at events that have hit our own industry, and I don't mean to pick on Kaseya here, it just happens to be one that we all know. When Kaseya got hit, let's assume they're, and I don't know this for a fact, but let's assume their cyber liability insurance was covering the cost of remediation, and then whatever exposure that the MSPs incurred as individuals under there for their information being shared, right? That has a finite number. But as we all know, that had a trickle-down effect, right? The Kaseya got hit, then the MSPs got hit, and then the MSP customers potentially got hit depending on what configuration you were using for Kaseya. All of a sudden, something that was underwritten to be 5-10 million can all of a sudden become, quite frankly, $1 billion, right? So the challenge that's causing cyber liability insurance to become much more difficult to get underwritten is the fact that these costs are increasing, these exposures are increasing, and they don't know how to underwrite it. So it's easier just to decline, reject, and it becomes a little tougher to get. So we need to sort of pivot it back to our customers and really ourselves too. We need to have a mechanism to make sure that we're driving the right security decisions, that we're assessing and submitting assessments to the insurance companies that are proper. Your customer might be signing up for cyber liability insurance, but not engaging you and answering all the questions yes to get the policy underwritten. We have to be wary of that because that liability can trickle down to us, if depending on how the court of law looks at it. The other reasons that we want to look at that too is states are now starting to look at different legislation to help foster better cyber liability protection for all parties, not just, it'll certainly put a fence around the insurance companies, and we'll talk about that. But, states like my state, where we're headquartered, Connecticut, but Ohio, Utah, and I'm starting to see others, are adopting the concept of, if you're a company and you adopt a cybersecurity framework, let's say it's the CMMC or NIST 800-171, or it's the CIS version 8 controls, if you can bring in that control set, then prove out and measure to that control set, and prove you're doing the things that you need to do, and demonstrate how you're supporting those controls, you can be exempt from punitive damage if you ever get breached. And this is recognizing the reality of breach, Rachel. It doesn't take much for the hackers to be a step ahead of us. We can take all the protections in the world and a new attack will come in. And yes, there may be an answer a day later. But if we're part of the initial exposure, the 0-day threat, then hey, we're now part of the equation, right? So these laws are really to protect all parties. It's to keep the companies that in the state from going out of business and being too exposed down market. Yes, it doesn't solve for reputation risk, but it does make sure that if it goes to court and there's a remediation that has to happen, punitive damages can't be awarded. That's critical, because that takes what I showed you as an example before, where an insurance company expects a $5 million exposure for remediation and credit monitoring or whatever the case may be, and boils it down to that instead of it having the widespread net, right? And then other companies might have to invoke their cyber liability, but at least the risk is shared now. So these are steps that we see going on, and for that to get, for customers to get engaged, you as an MSP have to educate them. Your vCISO role needs to then get in and support them, and this represents, potential opportunities for an MSP.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier about shifting from, just operational to more of a leadership role, and it seems like this is an area to do that. I know you have thoughts about how MSPs can include this service in their contracts, so it's not just a one and done.
Rachel, I hear you very clearly, but I'm being told you might be muted. I'm going to put out a note there and just see if everybody can hear. So I just put out a chat message there, but I don't see anything muting you. We certainly don't have you muted on our side. So
my side is showing a green bar every time I talk.
All right. So yeah, they're saying that they can't hear you, Rachel. You might want to take a look at your microphone.
Unfortunately, if I hit anything over here, it's going to mute me entirely. So.
All right. Well, Rachel, you and I will work this out later. I'm going to carry the ball on this one, I think, the rest of the way. So let's talk a little bit about, what this really means for the customer, right? This is something that really becomes an opportunity for the MSSP or the MSP. It gives us an opportunity to build more solutions into the contract. You guys are already probably building your security stack into the contract, but what we're not doing is building in maybe a compliance layer or building in these preparation steps, maybe a once-a-year cyber liability assessment. There's professional services opportunities when the customer has regulatory compliance requirements and needs to adhere to those. There's other, you can build it as a compliance as a service offering. I mean, there's a number of ways you can build it out. But the real key I want to say here is not for free. We can't be giving this to the customer for absolutely no cost. And the reason for that is, we don't want to have that come in for the customer, have it for no cost, because there's going to be a lot of work that we have to do behind it, and there's going to be liability we're taking on and supporting it as well. So let's talk about what this service looks like, right? Let's start with the vCISO's pure responsibilities. One, a vCISO, especially if you engage it for fee, should be looking at all your customers' policies, reviewing things like acceptable use, written information security policy, what their exit policies look like, and really making sure that they identify where there's gaps and where there might be missing policies that they need to develop over time to really put in there, enforce to really protect the customer. The next thing they should be doing is looking at a communication plan as well. If an incident occurs, how do we need to communicate within the organization, to external partners, and potentially to authorities or the media as well. So you need to identify kind of a security team internally in that customer. And look, for small business customers, that might just be you to the owner. Let's be real about it. But the point is there has to be a defined communication plan, because if a disaster strikes, there's going to be a lot of stress involved too. So we want to make sure that we're setting the right level of expectation. Look, you'll be communicated to every hour, and this is how, and this is where it's going to come from as we're fighting the event, or every 15 minutes or every half hour, or whatever you agree to with that customer. Then you're responsible for helping the customer define the architecture they're going to require to support their security need. This architecture could be looking at the things in your stack, but also looking at where they interface with and the education that needs to be provided. Then the vCISO is responsible for driving, as I mentioned earlier, the cyber liability insurance preparation and the assessment preparation for our customers. So we need to make sure that we're driving that regulatory preparation, both by obtaining the information we need from the customer in there and interfacing with their key stakeholders, but also making sure that we're herding cats back at the office and getting the information we need from our own team as well. And then the final piece is really helping them develop a future state plan that has a plan of action and milestones. I'm sure many of you have heard the concept of a POAM, but where we're really identifying, just like we do in the vCIO side, what are the needs and requirements to fulfill our security plan? What is going to be the roadmap for delivering these services based both on priority and budgetary capabilities? And who owns the responsibility? Because oftentimes in a POAM, unlike some of the things we do on the vCIO side, the customer is going to own a lot of this. They're going to need to work with their legal teams and other folks to build out the policies that you can guide them and give them a framework to, but they're going to need to tighten up to make sure that they're legally enforced based on the state that they're involved with. So, we want to make sure that we're really keeping track of that, and then, of course, conveying how we're progressing against it over time. So, that's kind of the overview of the role and responsibilities of the vCISO. A little bit later, we'll be posting in the Facebook group, and for those that attended our call today, we're going to be sending you out a new marketing piece that we've developed here at vCIO Toolbox. It's basically a guide to help you build your vCISO program. So it shares with you what the roles and responsibilities of the vCISO is, what are the services you can provide, and how you can go to market. So almost like a vCISO in a box type of concept. So keep an eye on your email boxes for that later. And if you check us out on the Facebook group or up on YouTube later to hear this entire presentation, we will definitely do so. From a technical difficulties capability, Rachel and I will work on this as we're using some new tools to help with some better graphics that sometimes don't translate, I guess, over to the Zoom side of life. So we're going to have to take a look at that. But I appreciate everybody bearing with me and Rachel as we work this through. That stated, we would love to, at this stage, open up the floor to any questions or concerns. If you're watching us right now on Facebook, please feel free to click on the or click enter into the comments, and we'll be happy to speak to you there. And if you're up on Zoom with us, please feel free to either put something in chat or put a question in the Q&A. And at this point, this is the Ask Me Anything phase. So it can be about vCIO Toolbox usage, it can be about anything vCIO, or of course anything that we've discussed today around vCISO. So I open the floor for a few moments here. All right. Well, Rachel, I'm not seeing any Q&A coming in, but I do want to thank the folks that joined us via Zoom, one for alerting us to our technical difficulties so we can iron those out. But also, I appreciate you joining us because I think this is a key topic that's going to become bigger and bigger in a lot of what we share at vCIO Toolbox, especially as one of our missions here in 2022, is building the vCISO module into a true GRC tool built for the MSP sector. Allowing you to go out and engage your customers doing compliance requirements, doing those kind of preparatory needs. And a little bit later this year, you're also going to see an incident response capability built into our system where you can orchestrate workflow. So, the shift in security is on, and certainly, our shift in our conversations are going to be how to bolster what you're doing already on the vCIO side for customer engagement and experience, and bringing that security and advisory layer in and using one platform to do that. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I hope we have the opportunity to have you join us again in future calls.
Yeah.
And
if
Rachel,
anyone can hear me, thank you.
And we'll get your audio next time. All right. Thank you very much, folks, and we'll talk to you soon.